Spoiler alert for Honkai Star Rail up through 3.7, heavy on the 3.7 spoilers, as well as speculation about upcoming updates. Hold on to your butts for this one, this is gonna get interesting. How do you kill a god? Wow, what a way to start a video. There were a shocking amount of answers given that gods are supposedly immortal. Probably the most common way in legend is by being killed by other gods, and when this happens, very often what's left of a god, either their body or spirit, will go on to form a landmark or some new concept or tree or something. In other legends, a god dying and coming back is about as normal as sunrise and sunset. In modern day, there's a completely new definition for death that can be applied in this context. Death by explanation. What is divinity? If it's nothing more than something we use to cover over things we don't understand, the weather, the changing of seasons, the movement of planets and stars, so we don't have to admit we don't know, then in the modern age, where we're able to fill gaps in our knowledge with science and nothing more, the very concept of gods becomes unnecessary. God is dead, as Friedrich Nietzsche said. We have killed him, turning religion into funeral rites rather than worship. That's if you believe the explanation of the unknowable is the only purpose for divinity. Star Rail, however, is a world where most of the unexplainable things that inspired our terrestrial gods in the past have now been explained, and yet divine beings still exist, because the vast majority of eons don't really exist to explain anything about the universe. They just exist to embody the most important forces in it. Now, they can still be killed in the same way as gods, by another eon, by the shifts in the cultural forces that influence ideas, and if I'm right, by reaching the natural endpoint of their philosophy and falling into meaninglessness. But no matter how the eons die, there is one specific thing that almost always happens to them. They shatter. Of the 18 eons we have names for, 7 are at least missing, and of those 7, 5 are explicitly said to have been broken into pieces in some way. 6 if you stretch the definition just a little. But what does that mean? Why do eons shatter? What do they become after they shatter? And what would happen if someone tried to put one back together? Hello internet people, 'tis I, MMA. Welcome to part 2 of, I honestly still don't have a proper name for this, a breakdown of paths and eon mechanics? Anyway, last video we talked about how the paths are a non-visible spectrum of light created by imaginary energy passing through Fully's crystal structure to recreate the world according to the memories in that crystal structure. That sounds so much more insane than I thought it would when writing that. And I have so many thoughts on that after 3.7, we'll get to those. Today we'll be building on that and talking about the eons, specifically how we came to have the set of eons we have today. Call it a family tree of sorts. I'm super excited to share this theory. This is another I've had in my back pocket for a while, but wanted a little more evidence for, and I am so glad I waited, because we've learned so much about how the eons work in that time. As always, please leave your thoughts in the comments, unless your comments include leaks, in which case I will blaze a new dawn using your ill-gotten prophecies as fodder. I hope you enjoy! Okay, let's start by talking about everything we learned in 3.7, because I generally got two kinds of comments after the update dropped. The first was, wow, this got debunked, and the other was, wow, this is almost entirely correct, and my reaction to this was, oh, I'm gonna have so much fun explaining this. So here's what happened in 3.7. We got all our allies together, and we went and we shook our fists at the sky, and Iron Tomb was birthed in a shockwave of energy, and then everyone died. No, actually, that's what happened. Everyone except the Trailblazer and Demiurge Cyrene ceased to exist. But unfortunately for Iron Tomb, we have time powers. We were able to yoink everyone's memories at the last second and use them to supercharge ourselves with the power of Peach, and voila freaking la, we win. Except the story's not over. Turns out all the times we interacted with Fully on Amphorius, yeah, that wasn't actually Fully. Remember a few months back I said Amphorius was stuck in a time loop? Well, I was on the right track, but kinda swerved a bit before the finish line. The day and night cycles were just Lygus resetting the experiment to run it again 33 million times. But there is a loop, it's just only being experienced by one character. Cyrene, as we know her, started her life as the Demiurge. She was visited at the end of each cycle by Philia Cyrene, or Peach, who would tell the Demiurge stories from the cycle. Over time, Demiurge Cyrene developed a consciousness fueled by the story's memoria, and after 33 million plus cycles, the Demiurge escaped containment and ended up in the wider simulation as Mem, our cute little pink rabbit squirrel puppy friend, and she followed us around through the final few cycles, eventually becoming Cyrene, fought Iron Tomb with us, and when everything was finished and everyone was safe, Cyrene time traveled all the way back to the beginning of the 33 million cycles. And on her way backwards through time, she made a few pit stops. Turns out our helpful Sky Father that's been checking in on us during Emphorius was never Fuli. The person who kept our Memoria stable when we died and put us on the path of remembrance, it was all Cyrene doing those things, using memory as anchors to certain moments so she could revisit them. And at the end, or beginning of her journey, Demiurge Cyrene goes to Ides Elysiae in cycle number 1 and becomes the quote-unquote original Cyrene, and travels through the 33 million cycles again, finding her way to the Demiurge each time before being reset and telling stories to her past self to guide her into the future. This makes so many things click into place that I was still struggling to wrap my brain around. But more importantly, and here's where we get into our Eon analysis, Cyrene's story is important because it's also Fuli's story. Don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying Cyrene is the Fuli. Fuli's role is to be a time capsule during the apocalypse. Right now, while the universe is up and running, Memo Keepers collect the stories of the world and put them together in the Eden of Blessed Insight, or the Garden of Recollection, just like Philia collected stories for the Demiurge. When the apocalypse happens, theoretically, Eden will survive, and the universe can be recreated using the memories there as a template. And Demiurge Cyrene did play that role in the Iron Tomb disaster. We yoinked people's memories right before the Iron Tomb shockwave pretty much wiped out the world, but the distinction is we didn't recreate the world using them. We just used them as a power-up, turned back time, and took another run at Iron Tomb. Bottom line, this time, the apocalypse was reversible. But someday, probably sooner than we'd like to think, the world will be so broken that there will be no choice but to start over, and when that happens, that's when the Fuli will actualize and create everything over from scratch. And I talked about how they do that last month. But the next question is there any reason why our present-day universe couldn't have been created the same way? We were told Emphorius is a microcosm of the universe. What if the 33 million cycles are included in that? Maybe there was some previous irreversible apocalypse that wiped everything out, an older version of Fuli actualized during that, took that cycle's memory, recreated it, and voila freaking la again, here we are. This would mean Fuli is a once and future Eon. They don't exist now, but they have before and they will again. Next question, then what happened to that Fuli? Well, once they've done their time capsule-y thing and served their purpose, what reason is there for them to stick around? They've reached the end of their path, so they shatter. Unlike the dying noose imagery we got, I do believe this actually happened, because in this case we're also shown what happened after they shattered. Fuli is made of frozen memoria, so when they shattered, they sent big ol' chunks of memoria eyes flying through space, kinda similar to what the Garden of Recollection was trying to do with implanting a seed of remembrance in Emphorius. So when it exploded, the seeds would be scattered. Now, just for a moment, I'm gonna pivot to a different topic. Bear with me, it's important. You know how each memo keeper has their own way of preserving memoria? Pictures, films, books? Fuli has one too, and it's called the Children of Anosrva. Their memory storage system is a bunch of little pink people. So when those chunks of memoria ice exploded outward, they took portions of this memory storage system with them. Cute little pink girls floating in ice through space. Where have I heard that one before?
Stars?
March, Cyrene, and probably many others we've met on our journey are either descended from or are the embodied fragments of Fuli's memories. Makes it sort of ironic that more than one of them has experienced having no memories of their own. But what if that's the point? At the end of 3.7, Horta made it sound like only one of those children of Anosrva would ascend to be the new Fuli. And if it's true, that's obviously going to be March. But what if it's all of them? Picture this. Fuli uses the memories not of the memo keepers, but of these girls to recreate the universe, effectively emptying them out. Then when Fuli shatters, the seeds are sent out into the world as empty vessels meant to be filled with new memories and experiences. Then at the apocalypse, they'll all assemble back together in a very pink power of friendship moment and sacrifice all their memories and combine them to create Fuli. And once they're empty, they're sent out into the newborn universe all over again. If you know the oscillating universe theory, it's pretty much that. Expand, retract, ad infinitum. Hoyoverse could reframe all of this this within the span of a single update. They've already done that about 6 different times, and it definitely is a lot more complicated than this on a technical level. But as far as the basic framework of how the universe works, I think this is it, which makes Fuli not just the first eon of each cycle, but potentially the Demiurge of the entire Star Rail universe. I'm talking quiet because it's late and people are sleeping, but we are heading into December. The time of year for snow, decorations, and stressing out over Christmas gifts because you can't decide what to get people. But not to worry, this video is sponsored by Tokyo Treat and SAKURACO, and they have the perfect festive boxes for you to give to a friend or give yourself if you want. And not only are the snacks amazing, the boxes are gorgeous too. Every single month, I'm always excited to see what they do next with the designs. This is the Tokyo Treat December box, which is themed Snack and Wonderland, and it's full of fun and exclusive Japanese snacks such as exclusive Kit Kat flavors, which this month is double berry. The double berries being strawberry and raspberry. It is so delicious. And speaking of so delicious, one of my favorite items was this Joy and Cheer Cola gummy. It reminded me of one of those silly slap hands that were popular when I was in elementary school, so it's not as effective. It's kind of effective at sticking. Oh no. Okay. No, come on. Okay, I'm gonna steal its fingers. My inner child is so happy right now. If you're into savory snacks more than sweet ones, they've got plenty of those too. The French salad chips were wonderful, and I've said this before, Japan's flavors for things are just so different than what we have in America, and I genuinely think for most flavors, Japan does it better. The booklet that comes with each box gives information about potential allergens. Many of the snacks are also vegetarian friendly, and it also gives information about Christmas traditions in Japan, such as a lot of people on the internet know now, but it's a tradition for a lot of people in Japan to have Kentucky Fried Chicken for Christmas dinner. Now, while the Tokyo Treat box is more like popular culture stuff, SAKURACO is a lot more traditional. This month's SAKURACO theme is Holidays in Japan, and these snacks are made by artisans in Japan. They take the time in each month's booklet to tell you a little bit about some of the people who made these snacks. This month, it's Seiki, the maker of these matcha mochi. Matcha isn't usually one of my favorite flavors, but I'm getting more and more convinced that I just had a really bad first experience because dang, they don't miss. And another win for matcha, okay. SAKURACO also sends a household item with each box, and this month is the Minoware Indigo Plate. And I'm trying to get it to catch the light so you can see the craftsmanship on this. It's so beautiful. A few of my favorite snacks were the grilled prawn crackers. They were really crunchy and just a little spicy. Very good. This white chocolate sandwich cookie and the cheese and sugar cashews. I have had more sugary cheese from these boxes than I ever realized even existed, and I have never disliked it, ever. I'm a bit shocked. That's a fascinating flavor. And of course, there's the tea. This month's is a matcha sencha, and what do I have mine with? Just a little bit of honey. Not too much because I still want to be able to taste the natural complex flavors, but just enough to take the bitterness off because I tend to overbrew my tea. And yeah, I'm convinced. I just had a really bad first experience with matcha. This is really good. Tokyo Treat and SAKURACO want people to experience the delights of Japan from the comfort of their own home, and my goodness, they're good at it. I come away from every single box like my third eye has just been opened or something because I just didn't know food could do that. If you've ever considered getting one of these boxes, I highly recommend you do it this month specifically. These December boxes are incredible. And if you know someone who you think would like these, you could always get a subscription from them for Christmas. Or my family always gets some new snack, something a little bit exotic, and eats it together on Christmas Eve. Maybe you could start a Christmas tradition like that with these. If any of this sounds cool to you, the links to these boxes are in both the description and the pinned comment, and be sure to use code MMA at checkout for a small discount. I get a commission from each sale, and you get a little taste of Japan. Now let's get back to the video. Before we get into the weeds, let me just say, Star Rail lore is weird. I have praised it many times for its realism, which I stand by, but unfortunately, with realism comes a certain level of inconsistency. Records get destroyed, or changed, or misfiled. People lie. It gets messy. The further we go back in the lore, the more difficult it is to sort through what is and isn't real. And at this point, we're gonna talk about the very, very beginning of history, where most civilizations couldn't even see the universe beyond their own sky yet. So the records we have from this era are either 1, complete fabrications, 2, scientific theories, or 3, just don't exist at all. So from here on out, I have moments that I'm really confident in, and while I'm still staying within what we know about how eons work, everything else between those moments is leaps between stars. There's still so much about the history of the eons that we just don't know yet. All I'm saying is, many of you are gonna disagree with me in the next few sections, and that's fine, just please be nice. Okay, now with the oldest eon out of the way, let's talk about the rest of them, because this is the part where things get interesting. If we're doing this chronologically, then after Remembrance, the next one must be Equilibrium, right? Think again. I don't think Who is the oldest for one simple reason. They're an eon of balance, right? There's nothing here yet for them to balance. And this is a good time to ask, what is Who balancing? They ain't using that scale to measure how many pounds each eon put on during Thanksgiving dinner. So what is it? I'm not gonna drag this out. It's imaginary and quantum. I finally get to talk about this. I'm so excited. Last month I mentioned how the imaginary tree is kind of Hoyo's multiverse. What I didn't mention is that it's only half of the multiverse. The other half is something called the Sea of Quanta, a super freaking chaotic place full of unorganized data from destroyed universes all jumbled together. So it's less half of the multiverse and more the multiverse's junkyard. There are things living there. Our Mr. Yang spent about a year there before being rescued, and there's also giant eldritch abominations munching on the imaginary tree's roots because guess what? The tree itself is rooted in the Sea of Quanta and takes data from it to create new universes and worlds in its branches. Then, as the universes are destroyed, their broken data falls from the tree's branches into the sea. It's this ecosystem where the tree and the sea both consume and create each other. It's so cool. Now, I have talked about this before in my video on character elements, so I want to clarify real quick. The imaginary and quantum elements we see attached to characters and the cosmic imaginary and quantum I'm talking about right now are definitely connected, but they're not quite the same entities. That's gonna make more sense as I keep talking. But just to keep things straight, when I'm talking about the character elements, I'll call them imaginary and quantum, and the big cosmic imaginary and quantum will be cosmic imaginary and cosmic quantum. With that said, the cosmic and the character elements do share a lot of characteristics. Quantum and cosmic quantum both have to do with breaking things down, taking them apart, possibility. It's connected to the primordial sea, this dark, chaotic ocean from which everything was created, and it's also connected to the divine feminine. On the other hand, imaginary and cosmic imaginary are all about building, organizing, directing, and are connected to the divine masculine. I told you guys there was a reason. It's basically entropy and anti-entropy respectively. They are star rails yin and yang, and they are the two sides of Who's scale. So in order to set things up for Who, we need quantum and imaginary in the works first. And I am being very punny right now because the quantum and imaginary embodiments both have scales. Remember those eldritch chompy boys who nom on tree roots in the Sea of Quanta? Well, they may or may not be the leviathans that Qlipoth is guarding so diligently against, so it only makes sense that our embodiment of cosmic quantum would be a leviathan. You know him, you love him, it's Ouroboros the Veracity, everyone. As the Veracity, aka the person voted most likely to eat a building in their high school yearbook, they are the ultimate breaker-downer of things. And something else, quantum characters are often seen breaking reality. Little known fact, Ouroboros can create wormholes. The ability is called Borehole Blitz, and while the Swarm is also capable of it, it's directly referenced in Ouro's Fables About the Stars intro, and you see how it looks like they're coming out of a portal in their splash art? They have cosmic quantum written all over them. Meanwhile, our cosmic imaginary, Long the Permanence, has been associated with trees in a few different places. True, most of the tree associations tend to be more linked to Don Hung in whatever form he's taking at the moment, but I feel like it counts because he's so connected to Long. I have known in my bones for so long that Ouro and Long were supposed to be connected, but I had no comprehension of how, and there's absolutely still more to this story. But for today, we'll keep it at these two came into being, and pretty soon after, Who came along to keep them in check. And it's at this point that the rest of the paths start popping up in some surprising ways. Ouroboros seems to have remained roughly the same from their birth all the way up to their most recent sightings during the Swarm disaster, but Long is different. People think of them as super ancient, but they're not actually any older, they just died so much sooner, so we have less information. We do have a Myriad Celestia though, and even though this is one of those that has been discussed a lot, I don't think people realize how important it really is. In the video, Preceptor Tauran, yes, that Tauran, and a videoteca historian named Oppenheimer discussed Long's life, offspring, and the meaning of permanence. They say Long traveled the universe seeking the answer to existence and finding multiple sort of expressions of permanence, which kind of gives the impression that even the people in universe are a little confused about this path sometimes. The first is individual immortality, or the permanence of power. The second is the continuance of bloodline, and the third is ensuring cosmic peace. And eventually, at the end of the video, they land on my interpretation of the permanence, which is the idea of every ending being a new beginning. beginning, permanent cycles. Here's the thing about these 4 expressions of permanence. There is a path associated with each of them, beyond just permanence. Permanence via individual immortality is explicitly linked to Yaoshe in the video. Taran calls it the fallacy of the plague's author. But continuance of bloodline? That's propagation. Cosmic peace is tricky, but if we think of it as the dance of the planets and the stars that keeps everything in its place and in order, you see what I did there? That is literally the role that Enna plays. When we look at the eons as a whole, these 3 specifically align with cosmic imaginary more than any of the others. And I don't think that's a coincidence. The theory is, you know how Fuli is the crystal chalice the light shone through? What if Long is the light? We already know the light is imaginary energy and Long is the embodiment of imaginary energy, and the video makes a point of telling us countless new creations emerge when one dragon meets its end. So what if those countless creations include more than the 3 dragon races we call Long Scions? What if it also refers to the paths? The video also says Long traveled the universe seeking the answer to existence. Doesn't that also make them the original philosopher? And since the paths are all connected to philosophies, wouldn't them all coming from Long make sense? Okay, let's zoom out again and take another look at whose scale. You see what I'm going for now? On the quantum side of the cosmic balance scale, we still just have Ouroboros, but on the imaginary side, we now have 3 different cosmic imaginary eons. In fact, I'd go as far as to say 5, because 5 seems to be associated with Long in other ways, and Adrilla, our eon of meaning, does have some striking similarities to Long as well. So let's just slot them in there, and I'll tell you the 5th one in a few minutes. This is sort of my alternative to the eons come in pairs theory by Ashikai. Yes, I did finally break down and watch it. It's very good, and there are definitely some eons that are direct balances to each other, but my one gripe with the eon buddy system is it doesn't feel like it accounts for the ways paths evolve over time. The path eon system isn't monolithic. Taking the paths we have now and pairing them up takes some thought, but isn't terribly difficult. But the paths we have now didn't always exist. What about the past? Like in Ashikai's video, Nanook and Qlipoth are opposites. Who was balancing Qlipoth before Nanook was born? And that's not even mentioning the growing evidence I'm going to talk about next month that one eon may be able to evolve into another eon. Don't bash it till you hear the evidence, that's all I'm saying. I do believe the eons balance each other out. It's just less of a one-to-one thing and more of a light side, dark side, Star Wars type thing. And speaking of, we are currently looking like someone needs to bring a bit of balance back to the Force. So let's talk about the swarm disaster. Little addendum real quick. These are the paths we know of that came from Long, which is why I talked about them all at once, but Tazi didn't actually exist before the swarm disaster. See, we don't always know what sources we can trust when it comes to the eons, but one thing that gets brought up over and over again is those older eons are terrified of Ouroboros. Can you really blame them? So I believe the imaginary eons got together and said, hey, if any of us try and take them on alone, we're just gonna be an entree, so what can we do together? And together, they created the perfect enemy for Ouroboros. If Ouroboros always consumed, then they'd make something that would never let Ouro stop consuming. And so they orchestrated the rise of propagation as an independent path. The power of limitless creation, this sort of divine authority of propagation, did already exist, but it belonged to Yaoshe. And I have 2 main pieces of evidence for this. The first one's not as strong and gets a little more meta than I usually like to. If you look at the wiki, the original name for the Path of Abundance during development was the Path of Fertility. This is not the canon name, it was never canonically used, and there are a lot of reasons why the devs might have changed it. But this could mean that at some point in the planning process, Yaoshe had some sort of domain over propagation as well. My second piece comes from the readables. There are records from 2 different cultural histories that imply a major shift happened in Yaoshe's divine authority after a certain point. The first is the Xianzhou. Not too long after they were blessed by Yaoshe and became immortal, they started becoming Mara-struck. No huge surprise there, but when looking at the readables, they talk about it as if it were Yaoshe their self that changed. Merciful Medicus became the plague's author. The Vidyadhara record something similar from their history before they joined the Xianzhou. And the Vidyadhara connect to Yaoshe because Long has 3 offspring, and of the 3 paths mentioned in the video, the Vidyadhara most closely align with Yaoshe. Early in their history, the Vidyadhara had the ability to transmute the bodies of other sea creatures called the Transmutation Arcanum. And they'd use it to remove the bones from fish or take a fish and bloat it with meat so they could eat it. But that sounds not unlike Taziran's abilities. Then at a certain point, they just lost that ability, and the only ones who still have it are the High Elders who have a closer connection to Long. And notably, this ability of Transmutation Arcanum can be used to create new Vidyadhara, a thing which is not supposed to be possible possible propagation. What if the reason the Vidyadhara populace lost this ability was this power of creation suddenly split off from the abundance and started its own path? We've been told there was more to the rise of Tasiranth than is recorded in history, but given that it's not recorded, we haven't been told who or why. I think the other eons did it. And in their defense, it did work. Tazi created so many offspring that it quite literally out-ate the Veracity in the cosmos' biggest competitive eater contest and claimed the crown, otherwise known as the Divine Authority of Veracity. Without that Divine Authority, Oro finally gets full, and as all of us do after eating a big ol' meal, they fell asleep. They got everything they wanted and now have lost their ability to want anything. Let's look at whose scale again. Uh-oh, now we have another problem. We went from too much quantum to too much imaginary. So what happens? Boom! Quantum eons. Quick aside, do you see now what I was saying about Evernight ages ago? She has connections to these paths, not because of any real connection to the paths, but because she's connected to the cosmic quantum. And I am just realizing as recording this, oh my goodness, does that make her and March an equilibrium stand-in? I know I'm confusing people right now because I just said last month that the paths came from light refracted through Fuli, and I don't know what Ouroboros is, but they ain't light. But there is some weird wiggle room here if the two of them have a closer connection to Who than we currently know, maybe even being not just Who's scale, but the two halves of Who theirself. I do still believe in the rainbow paths and in the cosmic quantum and imaginary being the two halves, but there is information missing here to make it all align. Hopefully they'll address it in game soon. Okay, I'm glossing over a lot here in the interest of time. I'm gonna talk about each of them more when I restart my explaining the Eons shorts, but Noose was made by Xandar, as we know. Lan ascended to protect the Sanjo, and then Mythos and Aha, we have absolutely no idea. And any story we have about them is probably a lie. I do have a theory that the baby Aha saw fall is the infant in the mirror Idrilla, and at the very least, Aha, Noose, and Mythos are connected to them in some way, since the most simple definition of beauty seems to be meaning, and all three of them have to do with the deconstruction of meaning in one way or another. They all seem to have ascended by deconstructing something that draws from or is made of imaginary energy, which is quantum by nature. So what you should be noticing is paths over time are getting narrower and narrower, with the earlier paths having a lot more under their authority. Not long after the birth of quantum eons and the death of Oro, though, without something else to munch all the now Veracity-fueled bugs, the eons looked at each other and were like, oh crap, we overcompensated, we messed up. Lucky for them, Sunshine and Rainbows over here said, hey, we can take them. This is Xipe. Where did they come from? They are one of Tasiranth's kids. Let's reverse engineer this one for a second. In present day, Xipe has 3 faces and 3 paths attached to them. Harmony, duh, order, and I'm 90% sure the third is beauty, but during the swarm disaster, it was all just one. So think about what modern Xipe does, and then subtract order from that. You'd end up with something a lot more chaotic, but still unified, and with beauty in the mix, maybe it's even pretty. Now take away beauty. That sounds like the swarm to me. I will talk more about that train wreck of an eon in a short. So with Xipe's help, the quantum and imaginary eons all united and did the thing, and now there's no more Tazi. In the process, Xipe absorbed Enna and Idrilla, and this is pretty much what our scoreboard looks like up to the present. But we're missing a few important faces, and I saved them for last for a reason. I'm sure there have been people who have been yelling at me the entire video because there is a large portion of the community who believes that Qlipoth is the oldest eon. And to those people I say, now you see how easy it is to fall for propaganda. Qlipoth being the oldest is an IPC lie. I'm not being a conspiracy theorist, this is straight from Herta's mouth. The thing people always quote when saying Qlipoth is the oldest is one of the SimU devlogs, where Herta says, according to the IPC records, Qlipoth is the oldest. And then in the very next devlog, she lists all the evidence for why it's not true. Let's not forget for a moment that the IPC is, first and foremost, a religion. It's in their interest to convince the galaxy that Qlipoth is the oldest, the best, the most powerful, the one the galaxy is most indebted to, because the more they are indebted to Qlipoth, the more they're indebted to the IPC. So what is Qlipoth really? On a surface level, they have all the main hallmarks of an imaginary eon. They summon things into being, like the Skywall. They're definitely old. They could easily be seen as another expression of the ensuring cosmic peace fragment of Long that Enna stands for. Qlipoth even took on some of Enna's duties when they died. But Qlipoth also has a bunch of really interesting themes that aren't connected to the cosmic imaginary at all. There's this thing called a golem in Jewish mysticism. It's a statue, usually made out of clay, that's brought to life and used for whatever the maker wants, but usually to protect protect something. They're strong and durable, but they have no will of their own. They must be told what to do, which is a theme we see in our Preservation Path Striders, Qlipoth's followers, and all over the Path of Preservation. Even the word Qlipoth means something like a shell or a husk, and what this implies is Qlipoth probably isn't operating under their own steam. They're being controlled. I know it's been the topic of conversation on my channel that Qlipoth is being controlled by Tasiranth, and that's still possible, but my gut says they're more like Tasiranth 2.0. Think about this. The first thing we hear about Qlipoth doing that we can confirm is killing Tasiranth. So what if they were also created by the other eons for that purpose? A perfect enemy for the voracious swarm. I've talked quite a bit in the past about how I believe the swarm in its current form encompasses both voracity and propagation. They want to eat and eat and eat, so Qlipoth is built with no desires of their own. The swarm wants to grow and spread, so Qlipoth walls off the planets and separates them from each other. And as a little bonus for the rest of the eons, not having a will of their own means they can't go off the walls like Tazi did. Drawback to that bonus, not having a will makes them very easy to corrupt, meaning the more time Qlipoth spends in the presence of leviathans and swarm fragments, the more likely they are to take on their attributes. Enter the IPC, the followers of Qlipoth, whose main goal is to grow, consume, bigger, buy my Thneed, all for the Amber Lord at the expense of literally the entire cosmos. And everyone in it. And it can absolutely get worse. And this right here is the theory I've been holding on to for a year that gets more and more evidence with each update. The Godslayer protocol scares me, but not for the reason you guys might think. Thank goodness we dodged the timeline where an actual Lord Ravager came out of that conflict, but the timeline we're on now, if I'm correct, might be even worse. Let's for 2 seconds think about this, okay? What's gonna happen, do you think, when we put the very injured, very not whole fragment of the swarm eon into close proximity with the eon that compulsively heals everything around them? It's no longer gonna be a swarm fragment that we're dealing with, okay? And then it's gonna eat Yaosha. And what happens when Tazi specifically eats another eon? They claim their divine authority. Meaning, hey, congratulations for winning the stupid game, Xianzhou Alliance and friends. Here's your stupid prize, the galaxy's on fire. We end up with a Tasiranth that's much more difficult to kill with Yaosha's healing on their side, and multiple other Tasiranth fragments that they could now heal into fully grown other Tasiranths like a starfish. And what does this have to do with the IPC? I'm literally referencing all of my past theories in this video, but Locha is an IPC operative, okay? I'm still thoroughly convinced he's either Diamond or Oswaldo Schneider, and there is still room for him to be both. The reason why the idea of an abundance-fueled voracious swarm bothers me so much is because it's inevitable, but it's not supposed to happen like this. Real quick, let's jump all the way back to Long the Permanence again. They've got all these different concepts attached to them, but the thing that encompasses them all, somehow, is cycles. Every ending is a new beginning, just like the phases of the moon or the tides, which means that Long is another once-and-future eon like Fuli. They died, but because of the nature of cycles, they will return. Now, how about we zoom out to whose scale one last time? This is what it looks like currently. And after the Godslayer protocol, it would look like this. The eons are recombining. Aside from the death and destruction that would inevitably happen from an abundant swarm's birth, there isn't anything inherently wrong with Long being reborn. None of the eons are really good or evil, and Long at least seems peaceful. My issue with it is that the freaking IPC seems to be trying to orchestrate it, because they don't want to just follow preservation. If they did, we'd see them embodying the will of other civilizations rather than trying to impose their own. No, they want to be permanent. If they're somehow able to stuff Xipe and Abundance Tasiranth into Qlipoth Ennard style, Qlipoth, whose name literally means the outer shell of a thing, they are Eonic Tupperware, then theoretically they could recreate Long the Permanence. The problem with this, of course, is the divine authority of voracity is still in there, and I genuinely don't think there's a way to get the swarm to uneat the divine authority of eating. Well, at least in the end we can be assured that our lovely Astral Express is gonna be there to save the day, right? Except that's also part of the plan. No, we're not done yet. Remember there was one last path I didn't tell you? The one last fragment to the shattered window that is Long. All these other imaginary eons inherited aspects of Long, but what none of them really got was the concept of cycles. It's encoded into their concept on some level, but the wholesale idea of each ending being a new beginning was inherited by none other than Akivili. In order to truly resurrect Long, the IPC needs us too. And they have been putting in hours to get on our good side since Bellabog. And if that wasn't bad enough, if my theory about Nanook's identity is true, which I'm going to do a whole separate video about them next month, stay tuned, then that means now that they have their hands on the remains of the scepter technology, they might even be able to contain the eons with it. The IPC is now a shareholder in the Harmony family's base of operations. The Abundant War Part 4, this time with bugs, is right over the horizon, and here they are, following us around from planet to planet like a shadow. And while we know any attempt to resurrect Long isn't going to go how they expect, that isn't going to stop them from trying. They are about to make everything they've done before look like child's play. We barely were able to take down a dang emanator with all our forces combined. What can we do against an Eon, especially when our most powerful ally is the one pulling the strings? Hi, internet people! That's the end of this theory. I really hope you liked it. A couple months ago, I was spending a lot of time making shorts about the paths and eons, and this video is the reason why. I wanted to truly nail down what the path philosophies are, so in this video I could show you how they all connect. And I spent copious amounts of time on that to set up and prove my claims before I built them, and then I realized I had too many shorts and not enough time. So the shorts will be continuing after this video, and there are some assumptions in this video that I'll be addressing in the shorts, especially where eons and the meanings of paths are concerned. So if you have any specific questions you want answered, let me know in the comments. You may have noticed there is one eon conspicuously absent from all this. I'll be talking about them in my next video as well. I'm gonna do my best to get that out before the end of December, but I want to prioritize celebrating Christmas with my family, so if you don't see another long video like this before then, I hope you have a very merry everything you celebrate. And while we're on the subject, if you're looking for a good Christmas gift for someone or just a holiday treat for yourself, I genuinely can't think of anything better than a Tokyo Treat or SAKURACO subscription. Check out those links in the description or in the pinned comment to buy for yourself or to give to a friend. And don't forget to use code MMA at checkout. I hope you have an incredible December. Remember to take care of yourselves and the people who care about you, and above all, stay safe and stay kind.